everyone, Michele Dillinger here. Today I have for you a mini training on yoga and nervous system regulation. Now, if you're new here, I record these mini trainings each month exclusively for members of my Facebook group called Your Village Community. You're welcome to join my community. It's linked in the show notes right below this video, along with free downloadable resources. And if you'd like to connect with me or today's guest, our contact information is linked below this video as well. Now, I'm really excited about today's topic in particular because, as we all know, emotional regulation for our children is important, whether they are neurodiverse or neurotypical, and emotional regulation for ourselves is just as important. And today I speak with Marianne Crooch, who is a yoga and meditation specialist. Knowing how important emotional regulation is and nervous system regulation is, I asked Marianne if she would be able to talk to me a little bit about how yoga can help with regulation in general. And I also asked her to give me some specific yoga poses that somebody with no prior experience, who doesn't own any kind of fancy materials or supplies, and somebody who doesn't have the funds or the time to join a yoga group could do right in their own home today. So, without further ado, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Welcome, everyone. I am so glad to be chatting with you today. We have an expert joining us, Marianne Crooch. Marianne specials in yoga, meditation, mindfulness, and overall healthy habits. She's here to talk to us today about how yoga can help to calm the nervous system. Marianne, welcome.
Well, I'm so happy to be here, Michele, and provide hopefully some really great, helpful hints and tips.
I am so excited to have you. I myself struggle with anxiety. So does my son. He has anxiety as a comorbidity, along with a couple of other diagnoses. And we're always looking for tips, tricks, other modalities outside of medication and therapy, which we already employ to help work for him and myself to overcome our own anxiety and to help us regulate our nervous systems. So first, before we jump into the practical details, can you tell us a little bit about how yoga impacts your overall health?
Well, yoga helps in two areas, actually three, but we'll just cover two. One is, as we all know, it really helps your body, your physical health, but it also helps your mental health. And no matter how old you are, from very little, a 1 year old, to 99 years old, anyone can do yoga, anyone, and it really benefits. And it doesn't matter the limitations, whether you have physical limitations, mental limitations, everyone can do yoga, and it really makes a difference. Most people really focus on the physical aspects, and they're very familiar with that, improve flexibility, strength, endurance, cardio, that type of thing. But what I think a lot of people don't realize how much of a difference that yoga has on our mental health. And it reduces stress, it reduces your reactivity, it balances your emotions, it provides a little bit more joy because you're more in the present moment. When you're in yoga, doing yoga, you're in the present moment. And so it really allows you to be in the moment, which increases your happiness factor, which increases your joy.
I love that. And, you mentioned everybody of every age. And I'm glad you said that because this is a group where you're speaking to a lot of parents who have children, young children, and also some, preteens, teenagers. And I know particularly with my young children, when I tell people that they take yoga in daycare, they give me sort of the side eye, like, what is a 6-year-old doing yoga for? What do you mean they're doing yoga in preschool? They really are nowadays. And similarly with preteens or teenagers, they might balk at the idea of going to a yoga class. Come on, mom, I want to sit on my phone and chat with my friends on social media. I don't want to go do yoga. But yoga really can help us with our mood and with emotional trauma, with mood disorders, with our anxiety, as we've talked about. So how can yoga help children specifically?
Well, It helps all ages. And what happens is if a child is taking yoga, there are different formats depending upon how old they are. So you would not teach the format for maybe 6 to 10 year olds, um, and then place a 14-year-old in there because it won't work. So each age range has its own format. And what I love about the younger age of children, they have a hard time staying focused. So, like when in the younger classes, it's all about interlacing the traditional yoga poses in with like songs and games, things like that, stories, so that it's engaging. So, if we all remember the little game Duck Duck Goose, they actually may incorporate the Duck Goose game with a pose. So whoever's running around and touches that head, whoever is the one who gets touched on the head, that person, that child would have to get up and do that pose of the moment, whatever it is. So it engages the children. At the same time, they're getting some cardio, they're increasing their flexibility, they're improving their balance. So it's pretty awesome. And then as you get older, they tend to move more towards the traditional yoga class that adults take.
Right. So the standing still, the holding a pose, something like we might think of as a combination of strength and flexibility.
Yes. Yes. So it's not just physical. So with children, you can see a whole transformation. They're more aware of their bodies, because sometimes kids are like, they don't know where their limbs are. They're more aware, which makes them more in the present moment. As I said before, it balances their emotions, less reactivity. They kind of are more in the moment. They listen better. Oh, so much improves their focus, their concentration, their attention span, which is really hard for little ones, and sometimes the teenagers. So many. And then also for the physical aspect, when kids are growing, it improves their coordination and posture, especially when the older they get, when they're hunched over on their phone or their computer games, or they're hunched over in their desk. So, when I used to help out in class with my kids, and you'd see the kids just hunched over with their little books. So learning to stand up tall, bringing those shoulders back, just it literally is tweaking.
Even just
They're
sitting here as you're talking, I'm thinking I'm hunched over sitting here talking to you right now. And I know that my 6-year-old is in kindergarten now. So he's experiencing the first time in public school where he's being expected to sit at a desk for 8 hours a day. And I can already see that when he comes home, he's hunched more. He's leaning over. When he watches TV, he'll sit forward like this, kind of curled up. And I, even just hearing you talk, immediately start to try to broaden my shoulders and lean back and open my chest. And I can see how, if even just talking about it makes me want to tweak those little bits of my posture, how actually practicing yoga would encourage people to apply that then to their daily life. They might be more reflexively opening their chest and leaning back and rolling their shoulders down and having better posture, better balance. So you've convinced me, basically. So you convinced me yoga
good.
is a good thing for kids, teenagers, adults alike. So tell me practically, what are some things? I'm a busy mom. I don't have time in my day to go take, a yoga class 3 times a week. I'm certainly no expert. So if I wanted to teach some yoga poses to my children, what are some things I can start? Are there poses we can do together? Or more importantly, maybe are there poses that are really good for that nervous system regulation?
Yes, there is. There are specific poses for specific needs. So what I've done is I pulled in advance 4 poses, and if it's okay, I'll share those poses
Please.
on screen. Let's see. As long as you can see. Can you see those?
I sure can.
Let me go back to the first one. All right. So the first one is my favorite, and actually a lot of my students, whether you're older, because I do teach the senior citizen age and I teach the adult age, and I used to teach children, but child's pose is the favorite. For somebody who's stressed, emotionally distraught, it is comfortable when you can kind of curl into yourself. And any pose where you're trying to curl into yourself, that provides them protection. It provides them some type of safety. And so child's pose is very simple for those that are just listening instead of seeing the pose. Basically, you're sitting down almost on taking your bottom back to your knee, or not your knees, your ankles and your heels, and you're bending forward. So it's almost like you're kneeling. When you kneel, you take your bottom back all the way back to your heels and ankles, and the arms come out front. So your arms are out like this, stretched out, and you're really stretching through the fingers. Now, this particular variation is called extended child's pose, and that may be too much for somebody, for some children, mainly because they are too stressed. The next option is just to bring your arms back and stack your hands like this. You know how one potato, two potato, that old game we used to play?
Yeah.
And stack your hands and then rest their forehead on top.
Oh, okay. Like this.
And it's really having that pressure on your forehead. If on your forehead, that is an area, a soothing area. So I won't go into the anatomical aspect of it, but that is a very soothing point. So anytime you're massaging that point, it relaxes everyone, not just children, but adults. So stacking your hands, placing your forehead on your hands is very soothing and calming. So that's child's pose. The second one is knees to chest. This is very simple. I love this pose. You're laying on a mat or on the floor, and then you're bringing your knees into your chest. And you don't necessarily need to lift your head up off the floor. In this picture, she is, but you can just lay down and just hug, like you're hugging yourself. You know, it's providing that comfort, and we all need that comfort sometimes. So that's knees to chest. And then cow and cat. This is a wonderful stretch, but it also helps somebody who's experiencing a lot of stress, sad, emotional stuff that's going on. So cow is kind of like what it says. That's the first picture. And notice how her back is curved down. It's like a little dip. So she's kind of lifting her hips up, and she's lifting her head up, but that belly is down, and she's got that nice little curve on her back, kind of imitating what a cow would look like. And then going from cow to cat, and that's when you arch your spine like you see a cat does. So the hips come down, the head comes down, and on all fours. So it's just alternating between this cow and cat pose is very soothing. And then the last one is a seated forward fold. So there's a number of ways that children can do it. This particular one, the legs are straight out and they hinge forward and they reach for their toes or their feet. Some children, that's too uncomfortable on their legs, and so they can actually sit cross-legged,
Mm.
and then hinge forward, and then their hands would not be on their legs, but that they would be reaching out on the floor, straightening them out. And that's that comfort. It's bringing them comfort, coming forward and coming into themselves with the yoga pose.
And that seems to be a theme of all of these poses, coming into oneself, wrapping oneself in sort of that hug, that protective motion. What I notice about all of these is that it seems like you're really protecting that midsection. You're curling into that midsection. Is that the aspect of these poses that helps you regulate? Is it that curling in, that protection feeling that helps you calm that emotion?
Yes, it's our when we always feel, hurt or upset, it's basically our body's reaction. We want to react that way, and it's okay to react that way. We need that time to go within and settle ourselves. One of the things that will agitate children, even adults, if they're upset, they can't expose this front side. So if they're trying to come into something like this where they're exposing their front half, they feel exposed. That's not calming to them and their nervous system by being exposed. So let children, teenagers, even adults go inward, because that provides them that temporary comfort to soothe the nervous system, soothe their emotions.
That makes me think of something that I do instinctively, which is when I have to get up and give a presentation at work in front of a large audience, I always prefer to stand behind a podium than to walk around the stage with, say, just a sheet of paper or my notes in my head or an earpiece. I like standing behind that podium because it feels safer somehow.
Yeah.
And it's not something I've consciously thought about before, but it takes a lot of practice and a lot of courage for somebody to step out from behind that podium and really walk around the stage exposed to the audience. And I imagine that's exactly what you're saying, is that anything that brings us in, anything that helps us feel comforted and protected is going to decrease that level of anxiety and stress that we have in our body. So that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions that we had from the group ahead of time was actually in relation to a sudden onset of anxiety. Say somebody is at work and their boss calls them in and says, I want to talk to you in 20 minutes. And they've got 20 minutes, and all of a sudden their blood pressure has spiked. They're getting the sweats, their hands are clammy. Is there something that you would recommend them doing in terms of a yoga pose or a body movement? Maybe let's imagine that they're a remote worker, so they have to call in and can do this in their home and not in their office. But is there a pose or a body movement that they can do to help decrease that anxiety in the moment, to help them take those deep breaths and calm themselves so that they can go into that stressful situation without already feeling hyped up?
Well, any of those poses that I just talked about would be great, unless you're in the office and you can't get down on the floor. Of course, I used to do yoga poses in my old cubicle when I was working, before I retired. And so, if you can't do one of the poses, your best bet is really breathing. So, um, the fastest way to relax your body is specifically like a counting breath. So when you breathe in, you're counting, let's say 5 to 5. As you breathe in, you hold your breath for 4 if you can. Some people, it's all about lung capacity. The most important aspect is when you breathe out, your breath out is longer than the breath in,
Oh,
because
okay.
that activates that sympathetic, that fight or flight you know, issues, it actually soothes it, relaxes it, so you can actually walk in, do that presentation. So 5 beats in, pause, hold for 4, and then breathe out for 7, 8, whatever you can do. But as long as that exhale is longer than the inhale, and if you do that for about 60 seconds, you'll see a noticeable difference.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And I know this was just a quick mini training. If people want to learn more, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, the easiest way to get a hold of me is to go to my website at www.mariannecrooch.com. And that's a mouthful, and I'm sure it'll be in the show notes. And I also highly suggest there's one thing that parents could do with their children, and it's a great exercise, and that's mindfulness. For those that are not sure what mindfulness is, it's basically focusing on the present moment. And right now, I have a little short and easy mindfulness guide out there that you can download, which gives you exactly how to do it. It gives you examples of exercises that you can do with your children, and some of them are pretty fun. So that also helps level out our emotions.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, as you said, we will put the link to your website and, if you don't mind, the link to that mindfulness guide in the
Yes.
show notes today. So if you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, it's in the show notes. And if you're watching this video in our Facebook group, we'll put that in the comments. Marianne, thank you so much for being with me today. I am so grateful for you sharing this information with us.
Oh, you're welcome, Michelle. I was been so happy to be here today.